All right, hello, museum families, and welcome to RBCM at Home Kids, a play date through screens across British Columbia and the world, and that world includes Ontario today as well. The previous sessions are recorded. We have done, I last count, I think around 70 or 80 of these sessions, so they're all recorded and they're on our Royal BC Museum YouTube page. My name's Chris O'Connor, and I'm a learning program developer at the Royal BC Museum. The museum and my home is on the territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people, the Songhees and Esquimalt nations, here in Victoria on Vancouver Island. So I brought something for this session. I have this bird with me for today's session. And this is no ordinary bird. This is a passenger pigeon. And it's a species that is extinct, which means that there is no more live passenger pigeons in the world. And there's only a certain amount that are not alive but preserved in collections as specimens in museum and private collections around the world. And like this one, we actually have 4 in our collection. But if I look on the tag here, it says that this one was collected in 1883. So while it's extinct, and knowing that the last passenger pigeon died in 1914, as we'll find out, this one was not the absolute last passenger pigeon. But what is the story of that last passenger pigeon or other last animals of a species? And that question is what this new book, The Late Great Endlings, published by Orca Books, is all about. This is a picture book that explores the stories of these extra special animals. And today we're joined by the author and illustrator of this amazing new book. Hello, Deborah and Aimee.
Hello.
I'll introduce you both first, and then we can jump right into conversation about this book. So first up, Deborah Kerbel is the author of this book and many others for young adult, middle grade, and primary readers. And I was just thinking, Deborah, as you were saying, oh, I should write a book about that. Or I would imagine as an author, you're constantly thinking like, what's the next book or the next 5 books? She lives in Thornhill, Ontario, just north of Toronto with her husband. 2 teens, are they still teens?
One just turned 20 a couple months ago. My other one is 17. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, I have a 17-year-old as well. And a rescue schnoodle named Freddie, and Freddie made us quit a short appearance at your feet. Yeah. And then Aimee is the illustrator of this book, a multidisciplinary artist, musician, and arts programmer based in BC, currently on Thetis Island. And Aimee was at one time an artist in residence here at the Royal BC Museum. So we're so glad that you both can join us and are open to having a conversation about this book. Deborah, if you could begin, for those who haven't seen this book yet, can you describe what it is and yes, a little bit about it?
Yes, so it's called The Late Great Endlings, Stories of the Last Survivors. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with what the word endling means, maybe this is the first time you've heard that word. It means the last known survivor of a species or subspecies. We have that definition in the book. And the word was coined in the mid-1990s by Dr. Robert Webster, who was a physician from Jasper, Georgia. So this is a book about, I think there's 8 or 9 animals in here, which are the last of their species. And they were all given names. And they all have a really, really interesting story about them. So I guess the idea of this was, we've heard about animals who've gone extinct. You know, people know about the dodo bird and obviously dinosaurs, but that just seems like, you know, just a very vague idea of you know what we've lost. I think it's when you get very specific and you tell the story about the individual animal who was the last survivor. In terms of some of them, Lonesome George, it was decades. He lived as the last of his species for so long. And when you put a face and a name to something, I think it just makes it that much more poignant. So that's what I wanted to do with this book.
I would imagine it's also location as well, and also the people that maybe are around within that community or caring for that last animal, if in some cases, I would imagine.
Yes, in some cases, the last endling went in captivity, actually most of the cases, but I think there's 2 in here where they actually died in the wild, but they were being tracked and watched, and they I guess the people in the environment understood this was the last of its kind, but they didn't want to put it in a cage, so they so I think the last heath hen, Booming Ben, and Celia, the last Korean ibex, I think they both died in the wild.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So we were saying, Deborah, that you have written books for lots of different audiences. What is
Yes.
the audience for this book? When you were writing this, what was the reader that you had in mind?
Well, I write books for young me. You know, I was a very curious kid, and I was a very, very avid reader, and so young me, I think, would have just been fascinated by these stories, maybe from the age of 6 or 7 up to, you know, people put a cap sometimes, a reading level on picture books, but I find picture books are immensely fascinating to just, I will say age 6 and 7 up, because I think a 15-year-old could pick up this book and just be fascinated. I think an adult would pick up this book and just, it would really, really resonate with them as well. So that's my very broad age range, 6 or 7 at the youngest. Just comprehension levels, you know, you want to make sure that it's not just not going over their head, and then sky's the limit.
So the 6 or 7-year-old Deborah, what would be the animal that would like hook her the most? What would be the one that you, as a 6 or 7-year-old, you would be most interested in?
Well, I think for me, Lonesome George is just, every time to this day I read the page and see the beautiful illustration, my heart just tugs on my heart each and every time. So I think it's Lonesome George, who is the last he is the last Pinta Island tortoise, and he lived for 100 years, and 40 of those were as an endling, and that, as we say in the book, that was surprisingly young for a Pinta Island tortoise.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Which is a great transition because you were holding up the book, and Aimee, and you were talking about the illustration and the beautiful illustration. And it's what I love about picture books, even as an adult. Like I whenever I see a picture book, I want to read it, just because of the words and the images going together so well, and especially with the book that the two of you made. So Aimee, can you talk a little bit about your process of being an illustrator for this book?
Yeah, well, it was really exciting when I got the email from Orca, because I'm interested in doing work that feels like the right fit for what I do, which is a lot of nature inspired and kind of animal centric, well, flora and fauna, I guess, type stuff. And I also do a lot of kind of portraits, I guess I would call them, of animals. And so this just felt like it was perfect. And it was also kind of like near the start of COVID. So it felt really good to dig into a project at that time and just kind of really get like totally ensconced in it. So yeah, so the process was pretty, we went through quite a lengthy sketch process, I would say, or period, where I really wanted to get it right, just kind of with pencil on paper, to make sure that it fit kind of with maybe what Deborah's vision for the book was, or Orca's vision, and that I was kind of on the right track with the right vibe, because I think that was really important. And so what I felt my duty was to bring these animals back to life. So I wanted them to appear alive and colorful, and kind of the opposite of how they appear when you look them up or Google them online. A lot of them that went extinct, you know, before there was color photography even. And so there's very, you know, very little in terms of reference material out there. So it was really interesting to try and piece them back together in order to be able to draw them and paint them in a way that, yeah, that gave them that life back again.
And you have some images that speak a little bit to that.
Yes,
that
I do.
project. Do you want to share some of them?
Sure. Can you see it there?
Not yet.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay. So here's some images just about Martha, because I know that we had her. And I didn't, it's funny, we were talking earlier,
Yeah.
I didn't realize you had a taxidermied passenger pigeon, although it looks like the one you have is male and Martha is a female, so it looks slightly less bright coloring, but regardless, it looks like it's actually a really nice specimen. But the images that I were looking at looked more like this, which were just very sort of dead looking, to be honest, and tiny picture. I mean, if you zoom in, it's very pixelated, so that's always kind of difficult. This one, I'm not sure if this is a photo of Martha. It might be, and if so, this is definitely the best quality image that I could find. I think they went extinct in 1914, so we didn't have any color. And then here's some from a museum, some taxidermied specimens, which I'm sorry, but it just looks like it's been, you know, around a really long time and kind of starting to fall apart.
It's part of the challenge with museum specimens is that the coloration changes often over time just because of time.
Yeah. Well, even looking at I think it was a specimen of the Carolina parakeet, which is Incus in this book, and it was just a completely different color. Like, you know, the yellows had faded and the greens, and it was kind of difficult. Here's another one that sort of shows it's just
I think that's actually Martha from the Smithsonian, because Martha is actually in the Smithsonian.
Yeah.
Museum,
So
right?
there she is. Yeah. But all useful still, definitely useful. And if I could have actually seen, you know, one in person, then you can really look at like, oh, there's the spotting on the wings, and this is how on the feathers, and how one fits under the other one, and just like those little details I think are still very useful. But it's just hard to access that, you know, from your computer.
Next time you'll come into the museum.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess I can show, I just have a couple other sketches as part of the process. So this was just an earlier one that I presented to Orca, and then this one, which was the one that was selected. And then the process of actually painting it. And then the final one. And then I showed this when we did a little lunch for the book in September, I believe, or October. And so when I was working, I usually do as much as I can on one sheet of paper, because I just want to make the most of my large sheet of stretched watercolor paper, which is quite valuable to me. And so this is one sheet that I was showing that had 4 of the different illustrations on it. So kind of neat to see them all together. And this is some of the textures and the colors that you see in the background of the book. So these are some natural inks that I've made that I really love, because they have a really unique texture to them. And then some of them I kept in the original color. Some of them I adapted the color a little bit in the book. Yeah, so I'll stop there.
Thanks so much, Aimee. We had a comment in the chat about species potentially that people think are extinct, but then actually it's just that the live ones were not found. Is that addressed at all in the book, Deborah?
A little bit. We did mention Lonesome George. His species was thought to be extinct for many years until he kind of just showed up. Subspecies was believed to be extinct until 1971. A single surviving male was discovered. For the next 40 plus years, Lonesome George was known as one of the rarest animals on Earth. So absolutely. I mean, sometimes it's hard to know, is the last one gone? But after, enough time goes by without a sighting, the general feeling is it's now got to be classified as extinct. I will say, and one of the other animals in here that is just so fascinating, and really the impetus for me wanting to write this book is Benjamin, who's the last Tasmanian tiger, or thylacine, and his story is fascinating as well. I'm going to show you the illustration of Benjamin. So to this day, a lot of people really just don't want to believe that this extraordinary animal is gone. And there have been sightings all throughout Tasmania. You can Google it. People are certain, people are hunting for tigers, did we see one, in the dark one night, and maybe it's not gone. And the general feeling is that's just wishful thinking. It's been too long. But you never know. You can cross your fingers and hope one will show up, but really what you want is at least two to show up. And it's been a long time. It's been, gosh, since Benjamin was gone, I think the 1930s, there has not been another sighting. So it's almost 100 years. After a certain amount of time, you have to believe the animal, unfortunately, is not going to show up and make a comeback. We have actually a video. Are we able to show that?
Oh, yeah.
This was the video I came across. I'm always, news stories really, really fascinate me. I get a lot of my book ideas from them. And it was seeing this clip here that made me want to know more.
Tasmanian tiger, easily distinguished by his straight, unjointed tail, is also a dangerous opponent, though, like the devil, is now very rare, being forced out of its natural habitat by the march of civilization. This is the only one in captivity in the world.
So that, I believe, is poor Benjamin. And I saw this and I almost couldn't believe this is a real animal. I mean, I'm sure there's nothing like him that's left in the world. And what a loss to have that species go extinct. And really that's why I just felt very absorbed. I wanted to know more about him, more about other endlings, and that really took me on the journey to write this book.
Which makes me think of a question that I have, is that that's very sad. And there's, I imagine, like working with kids in the museum too, and when I talk about woolly mammoths or other things that have gone extinct, that there's a sadness to it, like the fact that an animal is no longer around can be hard to process and think about. How did you approach the element of that sort of the feeling of sadness that some readers might have from reading about these particular animals? And then also, Aimee, how did you approach that in terms of your illustration? Did that inform the way that you wanted to illustrate the animals? Deborah, do you want to go first with that?
Sure. It is sad. I was sad writing it. I gave this to my now 20-year-old son, and he was wiping away tears when he was reading it. It's a hard subject, but it's an important subject. And I don't know. We talk in the back what kids can do. I think it was important to leave it on a hopeful note. Pretty much all of these animals, their extinction came about from human activity, whether it was overhunting or habitat loss. And so, this is something that we can possibly work to correct or prevent more extinctions from happening. And having young kids, helping them be aware of, this is the world that we're in, and conservation is really, really important. And even at their own level, what they can do to make a difference. And so we do have a page at the end about how kids can help to make a change, with lots of ideas there.
What's one of those ideas?
Oh, well, what I love is read books about climate change, pass this book along to a friend and ask them to pass it along after they've read it. Start having conversations with your teachers, with your parents, your friends. I think that's just a great way to just help spread awareness and maybe get kids really just thinking about and excited about, wait, what can I do? There's a lot of tough subjects out there in the world, and I don't believe that shielding children from them and keeping them in a bubble is the right way to go about it. But there are ways that we can inform them and teach them, and help them possibly, they're our future, come up with some ideas to help make a change at any kind of level.
And especially as a parent as well, that having books like this as a way for having good conversations with kids, and helping them along in their understanding, but also adults with their understanding as well is incredibly helpful and useful. So
yeah, well, that's the thing with the picture book. There's two audiences for a picture book. There is the child who's being read to, and then there's the the older person, the reader, who is reading to that kid. So if this helps to bring awareness to, the older person, whoever they might be, who is sharing this book with the child, then you've got hopefully, more people learning, understanding, and getting engaged to possibly, make some change.
Right. And then Aimee, for you, in terms of illustrating, thinking about how the stories might impact the readers, both kids and adults.
Yeah, well, it's definitely sad. And the feedback that I've gotten from, people who have picked up the book, whether they're parents or they're just adults that are fans of picture books, it's sad, and it's we're living in times, most of us, where we're kind of bombarded with bad news all the time. But I think it's important to make space for emotions around these things. And so that really resonated with me, is not to shy away from discussions and topics that do. It's almost giving permission to be sad when you're reading this book. And I did also think about that it can be useful as a tool for that, having that conversation. And then exactly what Deborah was saying, talking about and learning about ways that we can stop doing the harm that we've been doing to the planet. So and definitely the page, what kids can do, I read that just as much what adults can do. And so by putting it in the context of getting children interested in these things, I would hope that equally, if not more so, it's getting adults thinking and remembering all of these things that we need to change right now, and really kind of getting curious about or wondering about why we are losing habitat, and why there's pollution, and all of the reasons why that are leading to the extinction situation that we're in. So I think the emotion is definitely a good thing. I think it's a healthy thing, and also hopefully it leads to an empowerment. It's that we can do something with these emotions.
And I think there's a way in which you, because of your illustrations are just so beautiful, and so vibrant, and really, I could only speak for myself, but I'm sure for many others, just feel so connected to these animals because of how you brought them to life. And then Deborah, how you brought the context around them to life in such a real way that it helps that process along. in a gentle, kind, but also like useful and productive way. So I'm interested in the last 5 minutes we have, because I'm so curious always about how authors and illustrators work together or not. And I know that this is actually the first time that the two of you have like officially met each other. That I'm so curious if either of you have a question for the other in regards to the book or in regards to the process, or in any way. Aimee, do you have a question for Deborah, or Deborah, do you have a question for Aimee?
Well, I have one question. I mean, I'm in awe of illustrators and visual artists. I really feel like we all use words, and we can all, anybody can train to be an author, but what you do, Aimee, and other illustrators, I just think that's such a unique gift. So I am in awe, and the illustrations are stunning. One question I would have for you is, I noticed they seem to be very large. How do you, and I don't know anything about the process, but how do you choose the size in which to make your illustrations?
Good question. So I like, whenever possible, I like to work as large as possible, because then you're usually shrinking down, but when you're working large, you can fit in more detail. So you'll see more of a texture when it's smaller if you start it bigger. So the Tasmanian tiger, for example, was, this big, like it was quite the original, it was quite big.
Oh, wow.
Because I knew that it would come down in size a little bit, but that it was going to spread across the 2 pages. And I just wanted I didn't want to lose any of the potential detail that I knew that I could get by going a bit bigger. And also by going bigger, you when you scan in your images and do all of the digital work, you have more opportunity to say if there was a future use for the image, if it was going to be, on a banner or something like that. You're already that much closer to the larger size. So it's kind of like a smart thing to do too, I guess, if you can. But the trick with watercolor paper is that when you wet it, it warps and you get all these shadows and stuff. So luckily I have quite a large paper stretcher that's just my go-to for projects like this, and it keeps things nice and flat. And
nice.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I just learned a lot.
Okay, well, my question for Deborah would be, what does it feel like to write a book and put it out there into the world to a publisher, and then what's the process on your end? Do they come back to you with maybe a few options? Do they usually just choose someone? Is it exciting? Is it scary?
To have the illustrator is that what you're asking?
Well, to wait to find out who's been chosen for your book.
Yeah, I would say my favorite parts of the whole process, or when I'm writing and all the threads come together, it's quite a magical thing. But then my next favorite part is hearing who the illustrator is, and getting those first images and the cover. And that's just, for me, such a huge thrill. I've had some publishers who've asked if I have any illustrators that I'd like, to recommend, but in general, they know a lot more than I do. They have an idea of what they want the book to look like, the style of illustrator, whether they want to use someone local or not. So I'm pretty hands off with that. I like I said, I kind of sit back, and then when the illustrations come in, it's really one of my favorite parts of the whole process.
Yeah, kind of makes it seem real when you get to see the cover. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Agree.
And speaking of real, this book is out, and people can get it either at bookstores or online. Yeah, they're both holding up the book. And Jenny will share both in the chat and in the comments section of Facebook Live again. There it goes. the link for ordering a copy of it. It really is an incredible book, and as a reader, just to be able to see like such excellent work as from an author and an illustrator, and having the two amazing elements come together, and have a book that's so important and meaningful, is really special. So thank you so much to the both of you for making this book, and then also making time today to speak about it. And thanks everyone for joining in both on Zoom and Facebook Live. We'll do another one of these next month, and then we'll make sure that we'll do some more after the new year as well. It's been great to spend time with you and Aimee and Deborah and everyone that's joined in. So thanks so much, and happy reading.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.